Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, everyone's been talking about, of course, the NYPD overtime corruption scandal. Overtime corruption, yeah, but who was really involved in this? Well, the man on the screen is the highest ranking uniformed member of the service, chief of department, Jeffrey Maddrey, who has since been suspended since this big corruption scandal has come down. And I just, not to make any light of this, but certain people have occupied that seat, chief of department, and were some of the greatest chiefs in the history of this job. Chief John Timoney, recognized as one of the very, very best. Chief Louis Anamone, just people just say probably the best chief in NYPD history. And then a close second, maybe up there, it's hard to pick 1, 2, and 3 here, Chief Joe Esposito, who just passed away last year. And I think they would all cringe, and Timoney and Chief Esposito roll in their grave over this horrific corruption scandal. And we can't talk about this corruption scandal without, of course, mentioning Mayor Adams, who's a retired NYPD captain, but so many people from his administration have resigned. Some of them have been arrested. His former chief of staff, Ingrid Lewis Martin Adams, there we go, was just arrested a couple of weeks ago for bribery. Sheena Wright, his first deputy mayor, resigned. Is this coincidental? Or is where there's smoke, is there fire? So did people that were Adams's, his crew, his loyalists, the people that he surrounded himself with, were these bad choices? It seems so. You know, overtime is something that is usually reserved for cops on patrol in the field and detectives, hardworking detectives, not for administrative duties, like has been seen here. The 1PP, one police plaza, we used to call them the Palace Guard. And right away, with some of these people, for example, Lieutenant Epps here, making $200,000 in overtime, not only should have that raised a red flag, it should have blown up one police plaza, you know, $400,000. Chief Maddrey's driver, who went from police officer to first grade detective in 3 years, unheard of. She also made $352,000, $462, which included $163,414 in overtime. A driver. She was Maddrey's chauffeur. And this rookie officer here, Detective Ada Reyes, also, I don't have the figure, but made a great deal of overtime. And these are some of the officers that are involved in this investigation. When the feds interview people to get a case against Chief Maddrey, that's who they were talking to. So this is disgusting. Anyone who's been a working cop, anyone who's been on the NYPD, you know, there's a saying that no one hates a corrupt cop more than an honest cop. And that's true. And many people I've spoken to on and off this job are just disgusted by this. So folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your next door neighbor, hold on to your friends, your family. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off the cuff zone, the police off the cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to NHL and UFC, BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joining me tonight to talk about this, the very learned, the very sophisticated, the professor, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary.
Bill, good
Welcome,
evening.
Mike.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Good to see you too, Mike. You know, this is, I think back in the old days, if this wasn't as big as it was, if this wasn't involving a crime, because there's no doubt in my mind that Lieutenant Quantisha Epps didn't work all that overtime. So in essence, if she didn't work it, she was filling out slips and someone was signing it, and she was being paid the money for overtime she never worked. So that's a big allegation. Easy to prove. Very easy to prove. She works in one police plaza. There's video all over the place. Did she show up to work? How about the Easy Pass on her car? Did she drive to work? How about her own cell phone? Did the GPS show that she was at work for the hours that she alleged she worked? So this is very serious, because if she, in fact, was putting in slips and someone was signing them and she wasn't working it, that is very, very serious. It's called grand larceny. Mike.
Bill, the last 2 years of my job, last 20 months of my job, I worked in police headquarters, and I was in an administrative position doing legal work for the department. If I had something coming up on a Monday, like a trial, I would work Friday, finish the week before on a Friday, maybe come in on a Saturday, interview witnesses, get ready for my trial coming up the following day and Monday. And I could put in for overtime, but it was time. I'd get 8 hours time that I could use maybe to take, a couple of hours off here and there over the following year. Because it wasn't ordered, I voluntarily did it. Now with Lieutenant Epps, if she came in on her days off, the most she could get would be time and not cash. The only way she could get cash, if she was ordered to come in, then she could get cash. And at that point, what are you ordering her in for? Is it a parade? Is it a demonstration? Is it a foot post somewhere? Is she answering calls, 911 calls? Is there an emergency where they need a couple of thousand police officers to go someplace because of some uprising or parade or whatever it happens to be? But there has to be a reason for it. There has to be, an event written down, has to be coded so that when the overtime is put in and she's paid, it comes out of a particular pot of money. Whatever she was doing, it's almost impossible to work that much overtime, because it comes out to about 8 hours, at least 8 hours a day to 12 hours a day, depending on the length of time you're looking at for like the last year of her that she was working. It's incredible. No one could possibly work that many hours overtime. Demanded that you have to work that many hours overtime. There was no rest overtime. There was no, parade overtime, no emergency overtime. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And you're right. You do not want to be the person who signed off on and authorized her overtime and put in the classification, the category for her overtime, because then you could trace back to find out what pot of money that came from. Is it from New York City budget, the police department budget, or did it come from the feds, that the feds had granted the NYPD money? So everybody who's involved in this is looking at grand larceny, committing fraud against the U.S. government.
This right here, Quantisha Epps, Um, According to the New York Post, in an article written on December 28th, more female officers in disgraced top cop Jeffrey Madry's orbit pulled down massive overtime and other perks. The driver for the former chief of department made an eye-popping $163,414 in overtime last year and resigned days after the Post exposed her boss' alleged sleazy conduct at police headquarters. Detective Ingrid Sanders was the seventh highest overtime earner in the department, boosting her total salary last fiscal year to $352,462. That put her pay not far behind Lieutenant Quathesha Epps, the top earner who made $403,515, including $204,453 in overtime. Epps filed an explosive OEO commission complaint accusing Madry of giving Epps overtime shifts in exchange for, we'll just say, hanky-panky. On the day the Post inquiry, Madry quit or resigned, or so put his papers in. Sanders was immediately transferred from one police plaza to a Queens precinct and filed for retirement on December 23rd. Sanders is the first grade detective, the top grade, who served in the chief of department's office since December 2022. She followed Madry there from the Patrol Services Bureau. She didn't return for, multiple messages. This overtime, the another one was Detective Ada Reyes, who made $55,923 in overtime, even though she was a rookie cop. So she made, in 2019, her pay jumped from $154,405, including $55,923 in overtime. So really, what they're saying here also is these women that I put up on the screen. That's Lieutenant Quathesha Epps, and that's Detective Ingrid Sanders, and Detective Ada Reyes. They're the targets for the feds. They are potential witnesses against Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry. How far is this case going to go? Usually, I think a case like this, they would have attempted to keep it in-house, that the Internal Affairs Division would have investigated it, but it got bigger than that. It went outside the department, the Manhattan DA's office, and then, of course, the feds, the FBI. The Southern District U.S. Attorney's Office is investigating this. So something is going to happen. And Mike explained Chief Madry put in his papers to retire, and the department has 30 days, or an outside entity like the U.S. Attorney's Office has 30 days to bring a case, or he'll get permission to retire, and he will get his pension. Could that happen accidentally on purpose? Or will they bring that case before he's eligible to retire, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, any police officer who retires has to give the department 30 days notice. And when you put in your paperwork, like I put in my paperwork and I retired, you actually are considered still on the job for 30 more days before your pension is finalized. So if anything untoward comes to the surface before those 30 days, they could try you and fire you. You see this a lot with cops who failed the random drug testing for marijuana or cocaine. They have 30 days to bring them to trial, or else they're able to leave. In this case, Madry put in his papers in December. I think it was January 2nd. The FBI raided his home in Queens. That day, the police commissioner, Tish, she suspended him. Now, at that point, from that suspension, he now has, within 30 days, his guns were taken from him. He had to turn in his shield and ID, and any sort of police laptop, cell phone has to be turned into the department. So he's going to languish for 30 days determine whether or not he is going to be brought up on charges and tried and found guilty by the police commissioner and also by the judge, I should say, the administrative judge, and his future, like in terms of he's going to be allowed to retire or be fired. That has to happen within 30 days, not just a trial. You have to do everything within 30 days. Now, in this case, you're coming down to the end because the time is coming down to the point where around the 21st, I read that that's his final day. So it's the final day. They have to have tried him and found him guilty and fire him by then. I don't think so. If that doesn't happen, he will just go off into the sunset with his very hefty pension. Now, that doesn't mean that's the end of his troubles. He still has criminal legal troubles to deal with, but at least he'll have his pension. So no matter what the NYPD does, and I agree with you, I think they'll probably just allow him to go out, and then the feds will just do their thing. And if I'm him, having my pension is one thing, but I might be collecting my pension while I'm sitting in a prison cell somewhere. And so therefore, Madry is not looking too good right now.
That could happen. Prying Paula from the chat. What I want to know is what they had to do or what they had to hide to get this so-called overtime. Prying Paula, the allegations are that they were trading sex for overtime, and whether they in fact worked it. And it seemed that especially the Lieutenant Quantisha Epps had no problem with it until Madry sort of left her hanging out by herself once Internal Affairs found out about this crazy amount of overtime, and she got suspended. Then she filed a federal civil rights complaint with the Office of Equal Employment Opportunity based on this allegation. So that's the allegation. Let me play this from 4 here.
Resigned suddenly last night, and now federal investigators are looking into allegations of sexual harassment and hefty overtime payments involving the former high-ranking official. News 4's Brittany Miller is following the story from our newsroom. And Brittany, this is quite a big shakeup for the department.
Oh, yes, it is. This story is filled with twists, turns, and explosive allegations. The now former chief of department, Jeff Madry, seemingly resigned out of nowhere Friday. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch says John Schell will now take his place in the interim. But all of this as state and federal investigators take a closer look at this case centered on allegations of sexual misconduct. Another sudden shakeup within New York City's police department, and it's covered in scandal. Jeff Madry, the highest-ranking uniformed member, abruptly resigned as chief of department Friday amid startling accusations of sexual misconduct.
The allegations are extremely concerning and alarming.
Mayor Adams faced questions at an event in Brownsville Saturday, saying Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch is doing a full review of all personnel and looking into these salacious claims.
She's conducting her review internally, and we'll make the determination on how we're moving forward with these allegations.
Police confirmed they're investigating, saying they take allegations of sexual misconduct seriously. Madry's resignation comes on the same day NYPD Lieutenant Quantisha Epps told the New York Post Madry, quote, demanded sexual favors in exchange for massive amounts of overtime, end quote. Now, we did reach out to Epps and her attorney for comment, but they've not responded. I can tell you Madry's attorney, Landros Landrew, told News 4 his client denies allegations of any sexual interaction and wasn't even involved in approving Epps's overtime. Going on to say, quote, it's very sad when someone gets caught with their hand in the cookie jar, like Lieutenant Epps, and gets suspended for suspicion of stealing overtime, that she is now trying to bring someone else down with these lies, end quote. City data shows she worked about 1,627 hours of overtime during the 2024 fiscal year, earning more than $200,000. That's on top of her base salary of nearly $165,000, allowing her to make well over $350,000. A source familiar with the matter says the Department of Investigation and the Southern District of New York are investigating the overtime payments. They're also looking into her allegations of sexual harassment, as is the Manhattan District Attorney. Meantime, Landros says he's unaware of any investigation. But when asked why his client resigned, he said the former top cop was already planning to retire soon because he just became a lawyer and will go into private practice, deciding to walk away now amid the allegations. And this is not the first time Madry has faced claims of sexual misconduct. Former police officer Tabitha Foster sued him for a hostile work environment based on sex. That complaint was recently dismissed, but just Wednesday, Captain Gabrielle Walls and her attorney added Madry to a sexual harassment lawsuit against another officer. Meantime, Landro calls that amendment a cry for attention.
So, Mike, the old thing with the smoke, there's fire. But my big problem with this is that there are many, I don't want to say alligators, but there are many people that made allegations against the chief. And it appears that he has run off this job, that he has fled this job. And as you say, he has 6 days to be approved for his pension. Mm-hmm. And the 21st will be that day. If they were going to bring a case, would they not have brought the case already? Or can they, at the very last minute, just order him to appear in court?
Billy, when I remember from the police department, you would do it as quickly as you can, so you'd have as much of that 30-day window as possible. Someone fails a Dole test within like 72 hours, you're getting the results. That person would be suspended almost immediately. Within probably about a week, they're going to be tried. The trial would last probably a day or two the most if they didn't resign and just quit the job completely, and that's it. However, you wouldn't be allowed to resign and keep, say, half of your pension. Like, say you were vested at 15 years. No, you would be allowed to quit the police department, and that is it. And you would get zero, no pension, no nothing. But you wouldn't be fired, so that you would at least be able to tell people, prospective employers, well, I left the police department on my own accord. But you had to do everything. It had to have the serve the person with the charges, get them into trial, have a decision made by the administrative judge, and then you'd have to have the police commissioner give the thumbs down and say, get rid of this person. And that has to happen within 30 days. So therefore, at this point, if it was really above board and on the level, he should have already been tried already, and that case should already be sitting in the police commissioner's office, for her decision to say, he was found guilty or something at a department trial. Do I second that, approve it? And then that's it. As it is right now, I don't think so. I think he's about ready to walk with his pension. The problem is this scandal got really big really fast. If it wasn't for the fact that it appears that the feds believe, they have probable cause to believe, that Madry was dipping into overtime funds that weren't NYPD overtime funds, the budget. It appears that the police, the feds, the FBI think he was taking money out of federal grants and paying for the overtime. And so therefore, they violated the terms of using that overtime. The feds will give you overtime for different programs. It could be anti-looters, anti-protesters, public safety initiatives, anti-terrorism. But overall, the feds, the amount of money that they contribute to the NYPD is about only 2% of the $5 billion budget. So you got to be really careful how you spend that money. And so it appears the feds are looking at Madry and saying, you didn't want to dip into NYPD money in the overtime budget. So you took it out of another budget that wouldn't hurt the NYPD or the city. It was the federal government grant of money, taxpayer money from everyone in the United States. That money goes there, and you took it and you paid off these ladies. And so that got him in trouble. If he just put overtime slips in and approved it, stealing from the city, the feds would not be involved in this whatsoever. But they believe he stole from the government.
Well, Mike, one of his excuses is that he didn't sign these overtime slips.
Good excuse.
He's the commanding officer of the chief of department's office. So
right.
Someone under his command signing these slips, he's supposed to know about it. He's supposed to review all of that. So his attorney saying he didn't know anything, that's not an excuse. This is from the newspaper, The Gothamist. As a candidate for mayor, Eric Adams pledged to cut NYPD overtime spending in half. He vowed to identify police officers who abused the opportunity for extra pay and subject them to discipline. But since Adams entered office, overtime spending has reached record highs. Current and former police officials attributed the problem to a breakdown in the chain of command, where the agency's checks and balances don't apply for those with a direct line to City Hall. Adams, a former cop himself, offered some of his aides, top officials, an unusually close hand in NYPD affairs, at times allowing him to leapfrog the commissioner on issues like promotions and policing policies. Department veterans told Gothamists that the close involvement of both the deputy mayor for public safety and an inner circle within the police department under Adams disrupted the NYPD's hierarchy and facilitated lapses in oversight. The controls are in place, said Ray Kelly, a former police commissioner who served under mayors David Dinkins and Michael Bloomberg, about overtime spending. They just weren't properly used or paid attention to. Police overtime spending, which in the past cost roughly double what the city allocated to parks, is supposed to be tracked by several individuals. For example, including the supervisor of each unit, but under Adams, it came more directly under the purview of City Hall. So I think it connects it to this man. Does he have 9 lives? Because he's involved in this corruption. He's already taken a collar. He's awaiting trial. And Mike, I believe you said his trial will come up
in spring. Yeah.
And the election is in November 2025, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
if he got convicted in this trial, would he be allowed to continue to run for mayor?
You know, Billy, I don't, under New York state law, I don't think so, because I know if you're a police officer and you're a civil servant and you're convicted of a felony, you automatically lose your job. That's it. Now, I don't know if that applies beyond that. I think it applies for many other civil servants. But yeah, I knew a police officer who was convicted of a felony in a shootout, and he, by operation of law, he was automatically fired from the police department without anybody picking up a pen. That's it. The moment you're convicted of a felony, you lose your job. Now, I would think that it's the same for the mayor. I'm not sure, but with New York state politics, it's strange. The governor of New York state actually does have the ability under New York state law to remove Adams administratively from his position right now. And she hasn't done that. She may be waiting for something further to happen. But I believe you're right, that if you're convicted of a felony, that under New York state law, you automatically lose your civil service position.
You know, I'm concerned because every administration has their go-to guys. They have their people that came up with them. We would call them, you know, his contracts.
Right.
That's a common word in the police department. These people here that you see up on the screen were all his contracts. Eddie Caban, former police commissioner. David Banks, schools chancellor. Ashwin Vazan, Tim Pearson, Lisa Zornberg, Phil Banks, former NYPD chief of department. Winnie Greco, Rana Abazova, Mohammed all of these people, what do they have in common? They all resigned.
Yeah.
So how much longer? And this horrendous corruption we have right now with Chief Madry, with this basically pay for play with this overtime, I can't help feel, as a working cop that I was my whole police career, I can't help but feel bad for the actually hard-working cops out there that depend on overtime to pay their bills. Because now undoubtedly it's going to be shut down because of the greed of a few, with the misuse of overtime of a few. The misuse of overtime by inside people that were in administrative positions, or with this police officer, detective on the screen, Ingrid Sanders. She was driving Madry and making over $350,000. That's not what overtime is meant for. You know, just recently, the governor mentioned that she wants to have a cop on every train. Good luck. A, they don't have the manpower. B, you want to do that? You're going to have to pay them overtime.
Sure.
Because you don't have the personnel. So you want to put a cop on every train because you want to get reelected in November? You're going to have to pay overtime. And now the word overtime is a dirty word in New York City and on the NYPD. Let me play this video here. Channel 7.
Now to the latest on the upheaval at the NYPD. Federal prosecutors today launched an investigation into former Chief of Department Jeffrey Maddrey. Investigators searched several locations tied to Maddrey, including his Queens home. He was also suspended from the department. Maddrey had already announced his resignation after he was accused of taking sexual favors from a female lieutenant in exchange for approving overtime pay. Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles is live in Rosedale, Queens with more. Darla.
Lauren, this investigation is being led by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. They were here at the home of former Chief of Department Jeffrey Maddrey earlier this morning. Sources say this investigation is into both Maddrey and members of his department, and they're looking for electronic devices, cell phone, text messages, emails, anything that might corroborate approving these exorbitant amounts of overtime. For the second time in 6 months, the FBI executing a search warrant at the home of top NYPD brass. Agents spotted removing boxes from the Rosedale, Queens home of former Chief of Department Jeffrey Maddrey early Thursday morning.
This case was the fraudulent submission of overtime, from what I understand. So this is the entire 14th floor, pretty much, of the NYPD has been affected by this. And this is not something we see every day.
Have we seen it ever?
No, not in my time.
Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch announcing Maddrey's suspension as of 6:45 a.m.
You know, I just want to make a comment on that. No doubt Police Commissioner Tisch is honest as the day is long. She wants to do a good job. But to me, it sort of like screams fraud when a man is sitting right next to you telling you what to do, who is himself part of the most corrupt administration, one of the most corrupt administrations in New York City history. How do you make these decisions on his bequest when he's dirty? He's corrupt. Let's face it. He's already been arrested. Mike, am I out of line here? I mean, I find this ridiculous.
Bill, because he's still in position, he gets the right to choose the fire commissioner, sanitation commissioner, police commissioner, all those, discretionary, appointments, and they serve at his pleasure. And at this point, Maddrey is a huge embarrassment to him, a huge, stone around his neck while he prepares for, in 10 months from now for a re-election, for hope for another 4 years. And he's facing some opposition. He's going to allow, I think, Jessica Tisch to do what she wants to do so long as it suits his political purposes. If he wants Maddrey to be gone so that the people don't associate him with Maddrey anymore, he'll let her do her thing. If for any reason she demotes someone or fires somebody, or charges somebody with some sort of activity, and then they're facing separation from the department, he'll put his foot down behind the scenes. But right now, he's a man whose political future is hanging in the balance, and so she'll be able to do and clean house, whatever she wants to do, so long as he thinks it's okay for his political future. And because he's running this year right now in 10 months, it's the mayoral election season right now. He's got to look, and he's going to cut associates right out if he has to, cut them off, whatever, drop them like a bad cold, whatever he has to do, he's going to do it. But yeah, it is kind of strange that you got this juxtaposition of Tisch, who's a police commissioner, and she's making decisions, and the guy who ultimately has the power over her himself is going to be on trial in a couple of months. Really, really strange. Politics make strange bedfellows.
I find that extremely disconcerting. And I think what we might see is Hochul, for her own self-preservation, perhaps remove Adams.
She's facing re-election too.
Right, she's up for re-election. It's not that she has any loyalty to him. She has loyalty to herself. And if this will affect her own re-election, she will remove Adams as fast as you can say Governor Hochul. So that's one of the things we have to watch. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff. Real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Ring that bell. Share us with your friends and your family. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with count of 5 different levels. And we appreciate all our fans, our friends, and all the people that support this channel.
Saying in my direction, the Internal Affairs Bureau of the New York City Police Department is working with law enforcement authorities to investigate allegations against former Chief of Department Jeffrey Maddrey. Allegations of overtime abuse and sexual misconduct prompting Maddrey's abrupt resignation almost 2 weeks ago, which under normal circumstances would have gone into effect in 30 days. But now it's on pause.
The clock has stopped since he's been suspended, as far as I know. All right, so this also now the investigation continues. So it puts him in a no man's land, to be honest with you, Chief Maddrey, and possibly others as well.
According to departmental records, Lieutenant Quantisha Epps, Maddrey's personnel officer, worked more than 1,600 hours in the fiscal year of 2024, bumping her salary to $406,000. It also shows Detective Ingrid Sanders, Maddrey's driver, with more than 1,400 hours of overtime, bumping her salary to $352,000. Maddrey's second in command, Deputy Chief Paul Saraceno, who oversaw overtime approval, was modified Wednesday evening. And Monday, Commissioner Jessica Tisch removed 14 officials from the Internal Affairs Bureau after the chief also abruptly resigned in the overtime abuse scandal.
That is over the top. I've never seen this before, how much overtime was taken. So we're in a different world here from my time. We had a bunch of things to prevent this, redundancies.
But an EEOC complaint filed by Lieutenant Epps accuses Maddrey of quid pro quo sexual harassment, coercing her to perform sexual acts in exchange for overtime, and that in October 2024, when she finally developed the courage to reject his advances, he retaliated against her to falsely portray her as an abuser of overtime. Now, those allegations by Lieutenant Quantisha Epps, those are being investigated by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. That is separate than the search warrant executed today here at the home of former Chief of Department Jeffrey Maddrey. And Eyewitness News has learned that the 14th floor office, his former 14th floor office of One Police Plaza, was searched last week by the was searched last week in connection with that those Epps allegations. Reporting live in Rosedale, Queens, Darla Miles.
Unbelievable, right? And, Mike, another thing that is allegedly coming, and we haven't seen any reports of this, any official reports. Allegedly, they were selling promotions for money. And that apparently is, when that shoe drops, this could get really ugly. For example, a second grade detective, I guess I don't know the exact amount of money, makes about $10,000 more than a third grade detective.
Yeah.
A first grade detective makes lieutenant's pay. So it's a substantial amount of money. Some of the allegations we're hearing is that there were certain people in the department selling these promotions. Like the person getting promoted would have to come up with $10,000 to $20,000 in order to get promoted to second grade, first grade, whatever. This is another corruption scandal that we are expecting to drop soon. It hasn't been published yet, but these are the rumors we are hearing. So we can't put it out there as it's gospel truth. But usually when there's some smoke, there is some fire, Mike.
when you look at Detective First Grade Sanders, I worked with the detective first grade for about 6 months on one case. His name was Tom Nerney. God rest his soul. He is passed. He was the greatest detective I've ever seen. God help you if you ever came into his sights. There was no place on this planet Earth that you could hide to get away from this guy. He was relentless. He was assigned his own car. He was on call for certain shootings. He was fantastic, the greatest detective I've ever seen in my life. He worked his butt off, and he didn't make first grade detective until he had about like 25 years in the job. He was fantastic. Now, I believe there's about 80 to 90 first grade detectives in the entire department. They are the creme de la creme de la creme of the world's greatest detectives in the entire world. You don't get to be first grade detective unless you've got 15 years in the squad, 20 years in the squad. You probably have 30 years in the job, and you've worked your butt off. I'd like to see Detective Sanders's records. How many felony collars did she make in her 5 years going from probationary patrolman to detective first grade? How many robbery collars, homicide collars, murder collars, rapes, robberies, kidnappings? I want to see that. I bet you I had more collars in 5 years than she had in 5 years. That doesn't make any sense. So you're right. This is a huge scandal, and this is totally demoralizing to the good ladies and men in the detective bureau who who work all kinds of crazy shifts. And the shifts that detectives work, they're terrible. And they work their butt off to make the great collars. Some of them never get past detective third grade to second grade or first grade. And for her to be given a first grader shield is abysmal. It's disappointing. It's terrible. And it kills the morale of the police department. And that is detrimental to the public safety of everyone living in New York City.
Well, Mike, it's not just that. They also found in this investigation that Commissioner Jessica Tisch has reassigned at least 29 officers. Some worked under Jeffrey Maddrey. A high-ranking official was accused of demanding hanky-panky from a subordinate in exchange for overtime. So at least 29 officers were moved into new jobs over the past. This occurred on December 22nd. 16 earned over $100,000 in overtime pay in the last fiscal year. The moves came as investigators are scrutinizing accusations that Jeffrey Maddrey, the department's former highest-ranking uniform officer, demanded quid pro quo in exchange for overtime. All of these people that she transferred, again, they were Adams' people. They were Maddrey's people. They were not active street cops. They were inside people making this sick overtime. That's not supposed to happen. That's not what overtime is for. Overtime is supposed to be for working cops, working detectives out on the street, actually doing police work, not moving a pile of paper from pile A and moving it to pile B, not sharpening pencils in one police plaza. That's why one police plaza is called the Palace Guard, because the people that worked there, they couldn't hide further. Not all of them. Some of them are cops and detectives that worked really hard, and getting there may be a reward for the hard work they did over a long police career. But many of them are useless, and they just want to get away from the street. So these are some of the things, hopefully those 29 officers that Commissioner Tisch transferred, she found out were empty suits and got in and was like, the gravy train has stopped. Why are we wasting all this money? For people that are pushing papers in one police plaza. So is that a huge form of corruption? Yeah. And who is supposed to be the gatekeepers? Well, there's supposed to be inspections, and there's supposed to be internal affairs, and there's supposed to be checks and balances here. Obviously, the checks and balances removed, and perhaps they were removed by the mayor. What you heard when I read before about the overtime and some of the money came through one police plaza. That's why Police Commissioner Keechan Sewell, who was a great police commissioner, everyone hated to see her go. She left because she wasn't the ultimate decision maker. The deputy mayor was, and she was like, I'm the police commissioner. I don't want to have a deputy mayor telling me or second guessing or picking the people that get promoted, picking the people that are in the Palace Guard. So these are things that, again, it comes down to this man, and he's had pretty bad judge of character based on this, and based on that. These are his people, the people that he brought up. These are his contracts, as is known in the police department. Jeffrey Maddrey was his guy, is his guy. Pretty ugly, right, Mike?
Bill, when you look at it, I used to call Police Plaza Pleasure Palace. And that's, that's because that's what it was. Everybody was looking to hide. The priority should be patrol and strategic response in certain squads, and what you have is cops being taken off patrol, put into nice positions, and positions made that didn't even exist before. And everybody's acting as a rabbi, bringing in people that they've got contracts with and setting them up with a lot of overtime. After all, it's not their money. It's the city's money or the Fed's money. Don't worry about it. And the cops in the precincts that are answering the 911 calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, there's not enough out there. So they are shorthanded, and they have to get overtime, ordered overtime. They can't even go home sometimes. So, and they're frustrated because sometimes they do want to go home and they don't want to be on patrol for 16 hours straight, and so therefore it's a total corrupt environment. We've learned nothing in the NYPD over past corruption scandals over many, many years. You've seen them and I've seen them. In terms of sheer amount of cash to just a bunch of people who are contract people, this is the most I've ever seen. But what started out as a tawdry, affair ends up being this huge scandal. And as Bryce said, Chief Bryce said, he's never seen anything like this before. This blows the lid off the entire 14th floor of the NYPD. It's horrible. We have to live through it. Hopefully the police department will be better off on the other end, and controls that were there before will be put back into place with a new police commissioner and a new hierarchy. That's the only thing the taxpayers could hope for at this point.
Mike, retired chief of detectives Boyce said something that sort of flew in the face of what you said earlier, and I'm saying you're wrong. He said because Maddrey was suspended, the clock stops. So the 21st, it doesn't matter. That could come and go. The 30th could come and go.
Okay.
He's suspended. So that the 30 days doesn't apply because, again, he's suspended. Had he not been suspended, the clock would keep ticking, right, and he would be allowed to retire. But because he was suspended, he's not going to be allowed to retire. He could very well lose his pension. Let me play this from Channel 11.
Jessica Tisch saying she has appointed Edward Thompson as the interim chief of internal affairs effective immediately. That she says this is part of her campaign to rid this department of corruption as the investigation continues into those sexual allegation claims made against former chief of department Jeffrey Maddrey by a department lieutenant. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch announcing John Chell as the interim chief of department, filling the role of former chief of department Jeffrey Maddrey, who resigned on Friday. Maddrey is facing
the guy to the left in this picture of Chief Maddrey. He was also a police officer, flew up to first grade detective, and then they made him a deputy commissioner. And the other part of that was it was allowed in his rank to make overtime. So he's another one. And he was, again, just flew from police officer to first grade detective to deputy commissioner, and with no discernible talent or rank that he should have, never a boss. And all of a sudden he outranks many chiefs because he's a deputy commissioner. So very ugly, just ugly.
Sexual misconduct accusations. He's accused of demanding sexual favors from his lieutenant, Quatisha Epps, in exchange for excessive overtime. Epps holds an administrative position in Madry's office. A spokesperson for the NYPD says in a statement, quote, Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch accepted the resignation of Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry Friday night, effective immediately. The NYPD takes all allegations of sexual misconduct seriously and will thoroughly investigate this matter. Epps filed a complaint against the city with the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission on Saturday, claiming that Madry engaged in quid pro quo sexual harassment by coercing her to perform unwanted sexual favors in exchange for overtime opportunities in the workplace. Epps said that when she finally pushed back at the demands, Madry retaliated by claiming she was abusing overtime, prompting the department to launch a review. City data shows Epps earned more than $400,000 in fiscal year 2024. More than half of it was overtime. An attorney for Epps says she was suspended without pay despite putting in her retirement notice earlier this week. A spokesperson for City Hall responding to the allegations says in a statement, quote, we are deeply disturbed by these allegations and the NYPD is investigating this matter. Mayor Adams is working in close coordination with Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch as the NYPD conducts a separate department-wide review to ensure no high-ranking officers are using their power inappropriately. We will refrain from commenting further to avoid jeopardizing either investigation. Madry has been the subject of other sexual misconduct allegations in the past, including one from NYPD Captain Gabrielle Walls, who says she dealt with repeated unwanted advances. She filed an amended complaint in a lawsuit against the city last Wednesday, alleging that Madry sexually harassed her from the years 2015 to 2022. Madry joined the police force in 1991 at the age of 20 and rose through the ranks to become chief of patrol in 2021 before being promoted to chief of department last December. And back out here live as John Chell moves into the position of chief of department. His role will be temporarily filled by Philip Rivera. He most recently served as the chief of transportation. Now, we're still waiting to hear back from an attorney for Madry. Epps's lawyer says they will get back to us during regular business hours. The Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, saying that his office is also investigating this matter.
So, Mike, one of the things I think we need to explain also, many ranks on the police department are based upon civil service tests.
Mm-hmm.
So to go from police officer to sergeant, you need to pass a test. To make lieutenant, you need to pass a test. To make a captain, you need to pass a test. After captain, they're appointed positions.
Mm-hmm.
So you're so wonderful, you make deputy inspector. You're double wonderful, you make full inspector. You're triple wonderful, you make deputy chief. You're quadruple wonderful, you make assistant chief. Then come the bureau chiefs, the 3 stars, the 4, and of course the 4 stars. And those are all appointed positions. Same thing with grade. Detectives, when they get promoted, say detective investigator or detective first grade, okay, detective third grade, there are grades. Second grade makes sergeants pay. First grade makes lieutenants pay. And believe me, grade on the police department is a source of real scorn, real hardship, real jealousy from many people that may not be the chosen one. And I say that with all seriousness because I've seen amazing detectives, fantastic detectives that never got grade. So it's somewhat of a popularity contest or knowing somebody. That is absolutely the truth. That's why they say, do you have a rabbi?
Yeah.
That's the old expression on the NYPD. Do you have a rabbi? Do you have a phone call? And believe me, that is so important. Same thing if you're a sergeant to make SDS. That's sergeant supervisor of a detective squad. That was the rank I was when I retired. I made lieutenants pay. A lieutenant that has lieutenant LCS, squad commander money, makes captains pay. And then a captain is through a civil service test. And then there are other, even police officer can get special assignment, gets extra money. These are all contracts, basically. Your boss can push for you, put you in for it, and you get it. But it is a source of real scorn, a source of real jealousy. And there's not really a good way to do it. They'll say, oh, you're on the grid for grade. Oh, what is that grid? Someone with a phone call can fully jump the grid and get promoted immediately. So I'm on the grid, so I got to wait 5 years to get second grade, 10 years. Most first graders have 20, 25, 30 years before they get first grade detective. So it's a huge accomplishment, but it takes an awful long time to do it. And it's not, from my perspective, it's not the fairest system. I'll tell you that right now, Mike.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier about Quenisha Epps. She made lieutenant, so she passed three exams: police officer, promotional exam to sergeant, promotional exam to lieutenant. Then she was given what they call SA money, special assignment money. That's for somebody who's very popular, who has a rabbi, who's got a phone call, who's got a contract with somebody likes her, and they gave her a SA designation, special assignment designation, which means even though she's a lieutenant, she makes the equivalent of what a captain makes. However, the added bonus of that is not only are you making what a captain makes, but you don't have any sort of limitations on your overtime. Captains in the NYPD get paid in overtime with time, basic administrative time. But if you're a lieutenant, civil service, and you have an SA money and you're making captain salary, you don't have that limitation. You can make as much overtime as you want, as we could see with Lieutenant Epps. So it's really greed that has driven this scandal. People greedy for what they want. They're lusting for money or something else, whatever they want. But you're right. I remember there was an issue with the NYPD, with the PBA. There was talk the police department wanted to give training officers like a little bit extra money, like a little promotion, like almost like a lance corporal in the army, just like a little promotion. And the police and the PBA shot it down. They didn't want any distinction within the civil service classification, anybody. And I was a training officer for a while, and I was hoping I can get a little bit of a promotion, but no, nothing like that. Every time there is discussion about making grade, and you're on the scale going up the ladder of success in the detective bureau, everybody is watching everybody else to see if they're working harder and getting that, going up in grade 5 years. It's a real bone of contention. Maybe there's not a better way to do it, but these are discretionary rules that the police department has instituted. But you're right. A phone call, a rabbi will get you anywhere, as we can see in the NYPD with this scandal. It's terrible.
Mike, in my office, where I retired out of Manhattan North Homicide Squad, we had 18 detectives, and at least 10 of them were first graders.
Wow.
So but they all had 25 to 30 years on the job. So they had all earned it. But that was a place that was top heavy with first grade detectives. But obviously you want your most talented detectives in some of your most important units, and the homicide squads were some of the most important units. Just another aside. Yeah. Last year, they had to make it that captains could make overtime because no one was taking the captain's test.
Yeah, why would you want it?
Lieutenants were making not just more than captains, lots more money than captains. So the captains said, I'm not taking the damn captain's test.
Right.
So I don't know what amount, but they had to allow captains to make cash overtime.
Okay, good. Finally.
Do that because, as I said, no one was taking the test to be a captain.
Finally.
So, folks, when we bring this, I want to read this from the chat. Someone gave Mikey, Dr. Vinny Boombots. At the risk of being redundant, I must drill down on my previous assertions and state for the record that Professor Mike is a man's man. That's very nice to hear.
Well, thank you.
I'm sure Mike loves to hear that. Mike and myself, we bleed blue, man. We're NYPD. We'll always be NYPD. And when we see bad things happening in the department, bad things happening in New York City, it hurts us. It really does. And to see this corruption scandal on the NYPD is an ugly thing. And as I said, I can't help but feel bad right away for the hardworking cops and detectives that really earn their overtime. Because overtime is blood money, believe me.
Oh, yeah.
You don't go home to see your family. You sleep with your head on a nail. You don't get any sleep. You're eating all the wrong foods. It's unhealthy. You pay for it down the road. In the years you retire, all those years you didn't sleep, all those years eating Chinese food, pizza, and other cop food like cheeseburgers, and
Oh,
which
yeah.
of course we all love the comfort food, but I like to call that cop food. It's not healthy for you, but you're not going to eat a salad when you just work 24 hours, 30 hours straight. You need some food that's going to give you energy. So you eat all the wrong food. Jane C. from the chat, it's stolen valor too. Yeah, I guess you could say that if you get a rank that you don't deserve and
Right.
other people are just seething. People know who the good cops are. People know who the hard workers are. People know who the guys that you can count on are, girls that you can count on. And when you see someone that's useless and they're a first grade detective, what does that do to the morale of the rank and file? I'll tell you what it does. It destroys it. It absolutely destroys the morale. But again, we're looking at this and I just find it almost amusing that Mayor Adams, who again, there were 10 Democratic candidates for mayor. He was by far the best candidate. But there were 9 really horrendous candidates. But this upcoming election, there's people gunning for him. You're hearing a list of people running. Andrew Cuomo. There's a lot of people coming out of the woodwork. So will this corruption scandal bring this man down? I don't want to see him go down. He was former NYPD. He's not my favorite guy, but I think out of the group that was running the last time, he was absolutely the best. And I don't know how much that is to say that, but he was the best. Mike, we covered this, and again, it breaks our heart. I've spoken to a lot of people on the job, and they say, how did this happen? How did this man here taint this position, the chief of department, where the likes of John Timoney, Louis Anamone, Joseph Esposito occupy that position in such honor and such, people looked up to them. And then again, these are allegations, but if all of this is true, he certainly tainted this job. Mike, your final words.
Bill, we've seen scandals. You and I have seen many scandals from the early 80s when we got on the job to today, and it just gets worse and worse. And there's going to be more in every, city agency and every administration. There are certain scandals. We'll live. The NYPD will live through it. What we hope is that anybody coming in the future, rising up the ranks from, say, lieutenant nowadays to inspector in chief, that they learn from this scandal, and the safeguards that were put in place over the years will be reinstated, and that that police headquarters won't be answering to a deputy commissioner or the mayor putting their finger into NYPD business. We can only hope for that at the end of the day, the NYPD actually comes out of this scandal a better organization. That's the only thing we could hope for.
Dr. Vinny Bumbatz asked the question, very interesting. What's the worst NYPD scandal ever? Mike Dowd, Eppolito, and Caracappa. What say you, fine gentlemen? Vinny Bumbatz, I would have to say Eppolito and Caracappa. They were actually murdering people for the mob. And it didn't get the press that it should have gotten because they retired and were arrested like 9 or 10 years later for their crimes. So I think by far they were the most egregious, dirtiest. You can't believe an NYPD detective was murdering people for the mafia. Mike, your thoughts on that?
I think Michael Dowd, and I think it was a 7-5, and also in my old precinct, the 4-6 precinct, we had the Bronx anti-narcotic drive scandal in the early 90s, and that was terrible because it was actually right in my precinct, and that was disheartening to say the least. And there was a lot of fallout from that. People were arrested. The Mullen Commission came out of that. I know people who suffered grievously because of what happened there. So those are my picks.
Those are certainly fine picks, Mike.
Oh,
Anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. We'll see you the next time. Have a great night and God bless.
good night.
One episode just ain't enough.